Welcome to this edition of Off Meta Interviews. I am joined by Doug Levandowski and Jonathan Gilmour, co-developers and co-writers of Kids on Bikes. Hey guys, how you doing this evening?
Hello, I'm doing great. How about you?
It's a cold snap here, and I can't stand the cold, but I'm enduring. I'm soldiering through.
A cold snap for you as it gets to like 70, right?
I wish. It is. I think it's a balmy 43 degrees outside right now.
Okay, that is cold.
It's a little cold. And I have a thin skin. I can't take insults, and I don't like the cold. My mom didn't raise me right. Anyway, thanks for coming on, guys. Very excited to talk with you today. You have an active Kickstarter for Kids on Bikes 2nd edition, which has already met its funding goal in like an hour, maybe 25 minutes. Who knows? I know who's keeping count, just you guys in the marketing department, right? But it met its funding goals and surpassed it 5 times over by now. Very exciting to see that happen to good people. But I want to start by, if they haven't seen Kids on Bikes before, if they didn't know what the premise is and couldn't tell by the name, give them an elevator pitch on Kids on Bikes.
The elevator pitch is that Kids on Bikes is a rules light-ish RPG about big adventures in a small town. Is my one sentence pitch.
And that's why I let you do it. That was a good one sentence pitch. Mine would have been, yeah, it's and then you got dice, and 5 minutes later, people frantically pushing the open door button.
I think that really appeals to folks like me. I grew up in a small town. I think the idea of 80s kids like myself, we went on adventures and we tackled capers and all that kind of stuff. I think that's very appealing to my generation. But is that who the game is for? Is it for people that grew up in that type of headspace? Is it for a younger generation? Who would you say this game is really for?
This game is for everybody. Everyone should buy this game.
Please.
Please.
Buy for your grandmother.
Yeah, grandmas love it. So yeah, this game is for people who live there and people who want to have the sort of vicarious experience of, pretending to have lived there both. I've played it with folks who are older than me and who, remember being teens in the 80s. And I've played it with folks who were younger and were born in, so runs the full gamut. It's just sort of whether you're playing some version of your childhood or whether you're playing some version of somebody else's childhood.
I mean, it's really nice because it's always in the cultural zeitgeist, right? Like they're always making Kids on Bikes movies or media, Paper Girls or Stranger Things, really all of those. So, I mean, it's a cultural touchstone that works even for young kids. There's a lot of people that play it with their families.
Mm-hmm.
That aspect of touchstones, things that people can look to in media and reflect on and say, I want to kind of have that lived in experience. You mentioned Paper Girls, you mentioned Stranger Things, just looking at the game, and I had the 1st edition, but you think of things like, even if you want to go as dark as It, because I know it has dials where if you want to amp up the horror, you can do that. Lock and Key, I know it's a little bit more modern in terms of setting, but I think it could really use Kids on Bike system really well.
Absolutely.
What kind of dials do the players, the GM have to try to set it in those different levels of horror or magic or mystery? What can they do to make the world fit in with what they're aspiring to do or what they're using as a touchstone for their players?
Yeah, so the start of the game is setting both boundaries and setting the setting. So collaboratively at the table, you build your town. We have a set of questions that you go through and answer about it. Once you establish, like, hey, we're going to play a super dark, gritty game. Some of the characters, might not make it out. Or we're playing Scooby-Doo, and the worst that might happen is somebody ends the episode in a cast that comes off by the time we start playing next time. That level is really easy to set. And in 2nd edition, we worked with Kate Bullock to come up with some ways to bake that in even more and make sure that people are, continually getting to affirm that they're playing the game that they want to play, or sort of diverting things if they want to go further. If we weren't leaning into horror yet, but you start describing this horror that's like a little further than we went, I can say pedal harder, right? Like, I want more of that. And then John go, yeah. Or I can go, coast. Like, too much, back it off. Not X card, but like, let's not describe that in so much detail. Let's just smooth it out. So we built a lot of stuff into first edition to do it, and then even more into the second edition.
And to clarify
this-
for folks, if you weren't familiar with the idea, the X card is kind of like your way of saying, this is my safe word, not going here. This is not something I want to see in my game. And the rules text that y'all have for the second edition has a lot of good ideas and thoughts about how you build your session zero, how to tell your GM what your lines and veils are. I don't think that was the nomenclature in the book, but nonetheless, where's too far, what you want to see off camera, what you're willing to take a little bit of, all those kinds of different things. But has that been a big part of what you've put into the second edition? That leads into a question I had, which is Kids on Bike first edition, very popular, very well played. People love it. What did you want to get out of making a second edition of this game?
I think one of the things that we realized was that we had a lot of success with people who hadn't gotten into role-playing games yet and were experiencing them for the first time. So we wanted to educate them about safety tools in a way that made it mechanical and easy to slide into. You find a lot of old school role players are trying to resist into it, but I mean, we think they're really positive things. So we wanted to really integrate them into the core system.
Yeah. About 2.5 years ago, they said, we're getting close to running out of copies. Is there anything you want to, tweak a little bit in there? And John and I talked, and we said, yeah, there's one thing that we want to just change a little bit. Can we do that? They said, yeah, you can change something. And then about 3 months later, they said, all right, you good to go? We said, yeah, we got like 8 things we want to change. Are you guys good if we really change a lot? They said, are we talking like a second edition thing? We said, yeah. And yeah, like John said, part of that is baking that stuff in there so that they become like storytelling tools. That was something Kate really worked with us on and helped us with. And she wrote the section that you were referring to, where, thinking about them as a way to tell a better story, I think, is something that I've come around to. And that's, I think, a great way to pitch it to people, right? If I tell somebody like, these are going to help you make something amazing with your friends, you're more likely to go for it, even older players, than, like, hey, here's how you tell somebody, no, you can't say that, right? Which, is part of it, but it's really about making sure that everybody at the table thinks this was like an awesome story and this is exactly the world we want to play in, and that part where you did this and then that was incredible.
I think those tools are especially important, like you said, for new players. And it's not to say that experienced players shouldn't also read this and get a familiarity with these types of tools, experienced GMs. I know that when I was coming up and running games, this was not a conversation we had. We didn't have when I was running World Darkness or D&D or any indie game prior to, I don't know. It seems like a pretty recent development, the lines and veils and some of the other things that have come across. Those tools can be great for getting to integrate and know a new group of people, right? Because if you've been playing with the same group of folks forever and ever, maybe you already know implicitly this is what Doug's not into, this is what Jonathan's not into. But if you're playing with a new group, you don't know those pitfalls. You won't know exactly what's going to be that thing that takes away from their experience of the game. So I'm glad that y'all have gone to such great lengths with Kate to formalize these types of techniques and make people better at running games, better at breaking in new groups, bringing people into the hobby. That's a strong thing to do.
And I think, just to pitch for anybody who's a more experienced gamer listening, I think even having these tools for a table that's real experience, like when John and I play together, I know what some of his lines are. He knows what some of my lines are, veils, same. But, just given the day that one of us is having, especially like when COVID hit, right? Suddenly a bunch of people were saying, hey, like, just so you know, a line for me now is people getting sick. I can't do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And giving people the language to say, like, an experienced group sort of develops that over time, and like, hey, we've been doing this thing where like this thing seems to make you uncomfortable. You good? No, I hate this. Oh, let's stop it then. Like, not having the language to say, let's, veil that. I think giving even experienced gamers the language to say, today this is really bothering me is really great. So as an experienced gamer who's, I've been playing RPGs with my best friend for 30 years, but bringing this stuff into what we're doing has, in the past 5 years or so, has just enriched it so much. So that's my pitch for storytelling tools for experienced gamers.
Yeah, I really think they help us tell better stories in every way. Like there's absolutely no reason people shouldn't be using them because you don't know. And a lot of times groups that have played together for a long time never stop to ask those questions. So you may find out something has been bothering a person for years and they just go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this. You are a design and writing tandem. Take us behind the curtain. What's the division of labor here? What does one of you do that complements the other? How do y'all pair up on this? Walk us through that process as a design partnership.
It's a real bad division of labor that probably does not look good from the outside. I hate writing rule books, and the things that I discovered working on this is that RPGs are really big rule books. Dud handles almost all the writing just because he's much better at it. I try to help out where I can, but I don't word as good as he does.
Yeah, I word pretty good if I do say so myself, right? I'm an English teacher by day, so I'm used to that. I do wind up saying way too much. So John is good at being like, hey, this is 3 pages. I think we need a paragraph. I think John's selling himself short here. But in the process, we'll start by collaborating, thinking, brainstorming, coming up with rules, and then I'll whip up a draft. And then we'll look at it and then go through stuff, talk through it, do some play testing, brainstorm some more, and then I'll work that stuff in. When I'm going, is like, especially in the summer, if I can get a week or so to just sort of write, I can get a draft of a rule book done no problem in a week. And then revision is, just a little bit here, a little bit there. I love the writing part, but yeah, John and I collaborate on the system and the rules and all that sort of stuff, and then take notes together, and then I just sort of formalize it into English teachery speak.
One of the things that people take for granted, right? I've spoken to a lot of designers and developers back in the early 2000s, I should say. There were a lot of people who were entering the indie scene. They were good at designing games. They were good at running games. They weren't good at writing games. And so some of their games, like textually, were borderline unplayable. That was the kind of the criticism of those. So if you have somebody that can take those ideas and put them on the page, then that's going to be a big asset for what you got going on.
Yeah, Dud's fantastic at that, and I think that's the spot that we complement each other really well. And I'm kind of the fun police, I think sometimes.
Absolutely.
A lot of times Dud is great at mechanics, but I'll try to kick the tires and be like, no, let's just let them do the fun thing. Like I think exploding dice was a good example of that. Like we always wanted to play around with exploding dice, but we were having a lot of rules with it and be like, oh, well, maybe we should only allow it to maximum explode to a certain level or things like that. And I was like, well, what if we just try letting it go as big as it wants to go? And like, we looked at the math and we were like, yeah, I mean, that's fine. Like it's only going to happen a small percent of the time. And that'll be big moments. So,
right. Yeah. Sometimes you roll a 58, right? Like, and that's a great story.
yeah. And you kick the thing to the moon instead of just over the fence.
So is that a change from Editions? One version of the rules I was reading said that the exploding dice, like once crossed the target number threshold, it was done exploding. Is that a modification? That's gone?
That's gone. Yeah.
All right. All right.
And if you saw that in the current rules when you were looking them over, please tell us.
I'll take a look. I've been reading through several versions of the game in the last 2 days, so it could be a swirl in my brain. Not a good one. Speaking of that, right? Kids on Bikes had a couple other supplementary editions, or not editions, I shouldn't say, but they had expansions. What would you call them? Kids on Brooms, Teens in Space, some world-building books. Are those still going to be applicable for Kids on Bikes 2, second edition? Are there going to be things that people need to keep in mind when they're trying to translate that over?
No, it was super important for us to make it seamless. We didn't want all the fans and people that sunk money into it to, not be able to use all the stuff that they had and the systems that they liked. So we worked really hard on making sure that everything's compatible. And same with the other books. We want you to be able to cross over in any way you wanted. Like if you wanted your Teens in Space game to land on Earth and start living in a suburban neighborhood as, dads hiding in society, you could do that. So all the systems are very congruent.
Yeah, the Strange Adventures Volume 1 and Volume 2, which have adventure prompts in them, right, which are The way somebody described it to me at the last con I went to, which I thought was great, was that in Kids on Bikes, we give you the sand and the lumber and you make your sandbox. And with the adventure prompts, we make the sandbox for you, but then you play around in it. So rather than naming your town, we give you the name of the town. Rather than choosing where it is in the country, we tell you where it is. We give you some locations that might be important. And those all still work, right? The narrative stuff is pretty much unchanged. Everything we did in second edition is streamlining the rules. For example, the powered character rules in the first edition. The first 3 podcasts I listened to where they used a powered character, first one I was like, they got that wrong. Like, they just got that wrong. And then the next one, they got it wrong in a different way. And I was like, oh, is there okay, maybe there's a, and then the third one got it wrong in another way. And I was like, yeah, that's on us.
Yeah, maybe we're the problem.
Right. So yeah, we streamlined that. But, it's not a change to the stat dice system, right? That's the same. That your stats are still represented by the maximum value of your die. You still have strengths, you still have fears, you still have flaws, all that stuff that I think everything that people loved about the first edition is still there. And then we added some new stuff that I think people are going to absolutely love when they get to.
So one of the things about the game is that baseline, you can either play an adolescent, like a young kid, you can play a teen, and you can play an adult. So if you wanted to be the David Harbour character, Eleven's stepdaddy, you can kind of play that character and be involved in the game, and it doesn't have to be that adults are just buffoons that you avoid, but it could be, right? So if you want to play that type of game, that's an agreement that the players can make. But each of these different classifications have different strengths and weaknesses baked in. So if you're playing a little kid, you're a little bit faster, slippery, right? But if you're a teen, you are at the peak prime physical condition. You can open up a little can of whoop ass on folks, and then the adults have life experience. They've lived some things. They have grit and brains. Even if they're not the smartest cookie, they've accomplished things. Tell us about the dynamic between those characters. If I'm playing a little kid and my spouse is playing an adult, how do those characters end up integrating? What do you see in terms of the drama and the fun of having different age groups kind of working together to solve these mysteries or monsters in a small town? Where's the fun in that?
I think some of the best games I've played in with best character interactions have been where people have been at different levels, right? Because if we're all teens, like, I don't owe you anything. You don't really owe me anything, right? If we're all adults, like, we can all fend for ourselves, the expectation. But if I'm playing a kid and you're playing an adult, like, we have then baked in that idea that, like, you're kind of responsible for me. Even if you don't know me before, you only know about me around the town. If we wind up, trapped in an abandoned fun house together, you're responsible for getting me out of there, like it or not, right? And I think the relationship questions too helped to, which we kept and we refined a little bit, and we for second edition, took the ones that, thinking back, we're like, oh, we should have said this. Well, now we did. Yeah, so those relationship questions help to forge those bonds between you. And then, yeah, I think the age differences just sort of enrich it. And I think what I've seen most of the time people do is play a character or 2 characters who are related in some way, right? Like the little brother and the big sister, or the mom and the son. And those just, I think, make for great role-playing moments.
Yeah, and I think they really changed the dynamics of the questions too. Like the same question applied to 2 teenagers is very different when it's an adult and a teenager, or a teenager and a kid. So it raises the stakes, which is nice.
Yeah, an adult has something to lose. Right? They might have a job or relationships or status or something like that, right? So they may not take the same risks that a teenager would. That is an interesting tug and pull between those characters. I was going to say people need to go and get on this Kickstarter. They do, right? That is a given. But I was going to use as a carrot, right? There's going to be great unlockable stretch goals that they can go and get involved in. Y'all have already knocked all that out of the park, right? You've already raced past those. So unless you want to add some more.
But we're going to.
All right. Well, then people should get involved so that they can get some of these. So the additional stretch goals that y'all are brainstorming about right now and you can go ahead and spoil that for our listeners right now. What are you thinking about adding? But first, I do want to say you've got a bunch of adventure zine contributors. So does that mean, are these pre-built towns that people can dive into? Is that what you mean by adventure zine?
Yeah, so a lot of this was giving it to the writers and just letting them run with it, right? We're not gonna tell Zach Eubank like rein it in, man, right? Zach can do whatever the hell he wants, right? Or Banana, like we're gonna say, hey, Banana, don't that thing you did, don't do that. We're 100% just geek out, have fun with it. Most of them, we just sort of said, yeah, go do it. Let us know if you have questions, and so far, yeah, I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
So far, right, if you get in at the, I think the $45 level, maybe the $35 level too, I don't know, you're going to get 8 of these adventure scenes, right? They're already stretched out to that point. Tell us a little bit about these writers, why you picked some of the people that you did to help contribute and be associated with the world of Kids on Bikes.
I mean, it's always been important to us to have a mix of like people that Ivan, has worked with before and are bigger names in the industry, and helping to promote our friends and people who don't have as big of a voice or platform. So we've always really tried to have a good mix of those two things, and I mean that's where some of the best adventures and prompts have come from so far.
And tell us who's Ivan. You dropped Ivan. Tell us a little bit more about this
Oh,
Ivan character.
Ivan Van Norman is one of
Oh.
the principals of Hunters Entertainment, the publisher.
Well, is there anything else that you guys want to add about this second edition? I mean, you talked about the powers aspect. You talked a little bit about the relationships. You talked a little bit about the session 0 and how to give people those safety tools. Anything else that you are proud of that you learned from the first edition that you put into the second edition that people can be on the lookout for?
We put the rules for bikes in this time, which was a thing that was pointed out to us by our friend Ian after the first edition had delivered and everything, and people had been playing it for a long time. And I think we were working on maybe Kids on Brooms at the time. Right. And he's like, there's no rules for bikes in the game. And you're like, oh, yeah, we should probably do that, huh?
I think the way he started the conversation was we were like talking about something about it, and he was like, you guys are idiots, right? And we were like, we absolutely do, 100%, but why in specific? And he was like John said, like, you made a game called Kids on Bikes, and there are no bikes in the game, right? Like, yeah.
The second edition give me the ability to customize my bike. Can I make the Lone Ranger bicycle like Bill maybe from It? His bicycle's kind of like his talisman.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually put those rules out for Free Content Friday the first year it was out, or the second year?
We definitely put it out in Strange Adventures Volume 2.
Yeah, and I think we did it as a free content as well, so people could get the rules on Drive-Thru RPG. So the rules have been there, just not in the book. So they're more incorporated now.
So this will be a very holistic edition. You're going to take all these different things that you've sent out as errata, or you said, hey, guys, we know we goofed here. You can have it. And now you're putting it all into one place.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm excited about is, one of the things that we figured out is that people want more help running the game. We made this a game that either John or I can just pick up and run anytime, but we have a little bit more experience running games. And so for somebody who maybe has played like 4 or 5 sessions of D&D and 1 game of Monster Hearts, and now none of their friends have played a game and they want to run something for them, that's kind of a big ask to say, like, all right, well, run this game, have fun. So we're putting more stuff in there for them. There's an expanded GM section in here. And the thing that I'm absolutely most excited about, because their work on it has just been incredible, the book is going to feature an adventure to sort of onboard GMs written by Sen-Fung Lim and Alara Cameron. That is a multi-part adventure. I forget if it's 3 or 4, where the first one is very directed, and then the next one is a little bit looser, and then the third one opens it up. The last one at the end opens it up into, this thing happens. Now go tell your story. Like, did this thing happen? Go that way. Did this thing happen? Go that way. Yeah, I mean, their work on it shocking no one, has been just unbelievably incredible. And I'm so excited for the world to see that.
Well, let me ask you something. As two people who are experienced game runners, when I think about running a game, the first thing I look at are the player character sheets, right? What are their characters telling me that that player is interested in? What are they about? Who are they related to? And so you have these foundational pieces right already in the game. What are your relationships to other people and some of the aspects and powers? Do those kind of hold up as flags to tell the person running the game, this is what your players are into? Are there any other aspects of the character sheet that the GM should be looking at and saying, hey, that's a telltale sign of where I should be headed?
Yeah. And part of the GM section just runs through, if you're, in this part, pay attention to this, and this part, pay attention to this. I think the big ones are, this isn't on the character sheet, but in the town creation, this was one of John's ideas on the first one, putting in rumors about the town, which is just brilliant. Because now I'm telling you, like, yeah, I heard a rumor that in the middle of the water tower, there's a monster. And it might be true. It might not be, right? It might be we spend our whole time, like Lost season 1, finding the hatch. And it might be that there's something in there, or there might not be. Or it might not be a monster. It might be a government facility in there. So that part, I think, is a great part for them to pay attention to. In this one, we also added something that Sen came up with by a different name, but we stole it and changed the name, called a knack. And that's something that your character once per game can just do and be successful. Like I have a trick personally where I can put quarters here and catch them. I can do that. And so once per game, if that's going to help, I get to do that. It's probably something a little more involved than that, right? In a Kids on Bikes game. Like my character might be a computer whiz. And so I'm telling then you as the GM, I want this in games, right? I want there to be moments where we get in front of that thing and you say, this password is unbreakable. And I say, well, hold on, right? And so rather than rolling for it, it's this narrative moment that I get to say, this is my moment, right? And then similar thing with bonded actions, where like John's character and my character grew up together playing role-playing games. And so we can tell a story that just confuses the hell out of everybody around us, right? Or we can talk in code to each other by saying, talking about stuff that happened in game, right? Do the Polybius run, like, okay. And nobody knows what we're talking about. We can talk openly in front of each other in code once per game. And so we have a bunch of recommended ones, but players can also come up with their own. That's also a way to tell the GM, like, we want this moment where we have to convey information secretly.
And pedal harder is a good tool too. Like when people like something, we give them ways to verbalize it.
All right, so we've taught them the language of how to say, this is what I want, right? We teaching GMs where to look for the clues so they can better understand their players, and you can communicate openly at the table. This is all going to be in the second edition of Kids on Bikes, so check it out at Kickstarter right now. It's only a couple days in, so you've got plenty of time. Even when this interview goes up, you'll be able to see it. You can get in on all the stretch goals. There's going to be adventure zines, so if you think, I don't want to make a small town, I hate small towns, I hate small town living, I call it flyover states and all that kind of stuff, you'll have it there for you to where you can get involved. So check it out, Kickstarter right now, Kids on Bike 2nd edition. Before we go, Doug has been an irresponsible Kickstarter, an irresponsible crowdfunder. He's got 2 active loves. I guess it's not irresponsible. He's just a busy guy. He's got another thing going on that we wanted to talk about real quick. Tell us a little bit about Home, which also just launched on Kickstarter right now.
Yes. So, I mean, for the past year and a half, people have been saying, so are you doing anything? Are you okay, man? And I've been saying, yeah, I'm working on stuff. I can't talk about it right now. And these are those 2 things. So yeah, Home is a game that Yeonsoo Julian Kim and I have been working on for a little over 2 years now. We started right before lockdown happened, which made a collaborative map drawing game a real hoot to play test, but we found some ways. So it's coming out through Wet Ink Games, and we created this game where you and the other characters are trying to survive the night in this haunted house that sort of pulled you to it. You play these incredibly flawed, sort of terrible characters who go to this house for their own reasons, and maybe make it out and maybe don't. Jules and I went through all kinds of different mechanical ideas and narrative ideas with this. But it was actually in a playtest with John where, we went through it and he said, "This is cool, but have you played The Quiet Year?" And I said, "I have not." So we stopped everything. We played The Quiet Year. How are you with cursing on the stream?
I'm very okay with it.
All right.
That's my
And
love language.
I went, holy shit. And like frantically messaged Julian and was like, "Have you played The Quiet Year?" And they were like, "Of course I played The Quiet Year. Have you not played The Quiet Year?"
And The Quiet Years by Avery Adler. Also did Monster Hearts.
Brilliant, phenomenal designer and very kind person who very graciously said, "Yeah, go for it. Like, adapt it, do stuff with it." And so then we sort of built on it and took it in a different direction. But that sort of idea of you have this stack of cards with, in Quiet Year, it's seasons, in Home, it's parts of the night, where stuff just gets more and more intense as you go down, worked out just so well to bring the sort of narrative tension and have a way to provide both randomness but also progression. And so as you're going through, you go around the table pulling these cards and answering one of two questions on there and just making things worse and worse and worse for everybody at the table until you make it out of the house or you don't. And one of the exciting things that we're doing with this is we have these different batches of cards, these things called haunting tales, which give you kind of the genre of the house that you're playing in. So the first one that we did was, it was all about going back to your own childhood, your character's childhoods. And so one of the haunting tales is Echoes of Childhood, where things from their past just keep coming back, and they find their bedrooms, or they find a room that they loved as a child that's now been twisted. Or for, sort of the other end of the spectrum, there's like the house that's been twisted around by extraterrestrials, or there's the house where time has gotten screwy. And for the stretch goals on that we're hoping to hit a bunch of, we have at this point 10 writers lined up to do a set of haunting tales that'll take this in all kinds of other directions. So we have 5 to start, and so you can play very different versions of the game, and we're hoping to get 10 more in there as little packs with the cards you need for the haunting tale, and then one more character archetype to add in if you want to play with that one.
Is this a GM-less game, Home?
Yeah, it is GM-less.
That's exciting, because if I'm sure you two have experienced, maybe not if you've got such a kinship, you're always the one running the game, right? So now you get to play. That's a good experience. Yeah. If you haven't seen The Quiet Year, it's more of a world building exercise. A lot of times in a role playing game, you can build a campaign off of what you've done in The Quiet Year. So to have those two things integrated into a haunted house story, I'm very excited for Home, and looking forward to it. Hopefully we get to play it here on the channel soon. So very excited to go through that. We played a game recently that you might want to check out. It's called The Zone, and you can play it online. It's kind of
it looks so good.
And the fella Raph, who designed that, very nice fella. It is kind of like Annihilation, that movie Annihilation, where you're exploring a place that's been infected by this phenomenon that's mutating people and doing different things. And so it's GM-less. You're using these cards to get to the center, and then only one character gets to the center of that mutated Tootsie Roll Pop and gets their wish granted, but maybe not in the way that they wanted. So it's a fun collaborative storyteller game. So I'm interested in seeing these things come out of the design community, right? These things where people get to learn collaborative storytelling with these very strong tools there to help them light the way, to guide them to something that's a functional narrative.
Yeah, and if people want to incorporate this into a Kids on Bikes game, they can. I mean, not all the characters make it out of Home, but I mean, you can always tweak that a little bit at the end if you want. Or this could be a great way to build like that creepy house that's in there, and 30 years before, here's the story of what happened.
The prelude scene to your Kids on Bikes adventure, right? Not spoilers if you haven't watched Stranger Things, but there's a spooky haunted house, and there are things that happen in that, and that leads into what happens in the most recent seasons.
Yeah, when that came out, I was like, oh man, people are gonna say that like Doug's just watching Stranger Things and doing that. I've been working on this for a year and a half already.
For years ahead of time, yeah.
Yeah, right.
creative minds a lot of times get on the same wavelength, and you'll see, man, I got to get this out of my brain because otherwise people are going to think I'm taken from something else. Anything else y'all want to add or tell us about in either of these really great projects? Once again, Home is on Kickstarter right now. Home, the Haunted House map building RPG, and Kids on Bikes 2nd edition, both in active crowdfund right now. Anything else you guys want to tell us about either of those projects or anything you got going on right now?
Yeah, people can late pledge for CoLab, which is a board game that I designed that was on Kickstarter earlier this year.
It's called CoLab?
Yep, CoLab, CoLab. It's a board game, so you play down on your luck mad scientists who can't afford their own laboratories, so you share a co-working space.
Oh.
It's what we're calling a collaborative worker placement game. You work together with the other players, but you're still competing for the most victory.
I like
So it
that.
has
CoLab, and they can get it on late pledge?
Yep. If you go to the Kickstarter page, you can pick up a late pledge of it through there.
I'm so excited for that one.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The minis are so good. The miniatures hold dice above their heads. They're like your little minions. So there's like a slime and a robot and a Quasimodo guy.
This sounds great.
Yeah.
Why didn't I hear about this earlier? Where were you, Jonathan? Why didn't you email me?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll have to
You
check
must not
that
get
out.
the newsletter.
I knew I wasn't signed up for some newsletter somewhere. Well, we'll have to check that out, see if we can't get it up on one of our Tabletop Tuesdays where we play board games from great folks with great designs. Maybe if there's a digital implementation anywhere, we can try to get it up on the channel.
Yep, you can actually play it on TTS. The link's right on the Kickstarter.
Well, we will check that out in the interim and try to show it off for you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Doug, Jonathan. I appreciate your time
Thank you.
and your insights and the work that you've done. I know everybody is excited for Kids on Bikes 2nd edition. That's why it's already taken off. It's pedaling fast down the road. And I hope people will get involved with Home while it's there. So all those stretch goals for all of us nerds who want to make a haunted house.
Oh, yeah.
Through these tools, we'll get all the things we got coming to us. All the dark experiences we want to put in our role-playing games. Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate you in a big way. This has been Off Meta. You can check us out at youtube.com/offmetaplays. You can watch us stream at twitch.tv/offmeta. And you can tweet at us at any point in time. Doesn't matter when an idea comes in your brain. You can tweet at us at offmetatweets. And can they do? You want them to tweet at you guys? Are you interested in that these days?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Where can they find you?
I'm at John Gilmour, JONGILMOUR.
And I am equally expected. I am Doug Levandowski. So at Doug Levandowski, LEVANDOWSKI.
All right. Check them out on Twitter so you can keep up. If you don't want to sign up for newsletters, but you want to see what they got going on so you don't miss a thing, follow them on Twitter.
And if you want my newsletter, I'm happy to send it to you.
I need the newsletter.
Doug actually has a newsletter. I do not.
Do you?
I should.
Yeah. I have something I send out send out, and that's not monthly. It's right before I launch a project. I say, hey, here's the thing. If you're interested, here's the link. And that's about it.
Sounds good. So if they can get in on that action, then we'll get them signed up. Unless you have anything else to add, I think I'm going to let you go back to your business, back to your evenings. Do some more designing, do some more crafting, or see your loved ones. You got 2 active projects in Kickstarter. Maybe you need to spend some time with people you know. So
I got my my bivalent booster today, so I think I need to go to sleep.
All right. Well, good evening. Sweet dreams to you, both of you. Wish you the best of luck with these, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, take care.